In this module, we're going to look into some of the topics we may want to explore through art. This module will focus less on the art itself and more on the societal challenges we might be interested in addressing. We won't go too deep into the challenges themselves, but we'll start with a quick overview to give us some context and set the stage for the conversations you may eventually choose to consider. Please know that this is not us saying that you have to choose one of these topics. This is just setting the stage. Addressing societal challenges requires a good understanding of the relevant concepts like justice, equity, inclusion, sustainability, and empowerment. This section outlines these core concepts, highlighting specific societal challenges relevant to our society. Let's start with justice, which refers to the fair treatment of all individuals under the law, ensuring that rights are protected, wrongdoings are addressed, and everyone has access to legal recourse. In Nigeria, justice is essential, and without it, corruption, systemic inequality, and social unrest will continue to thrive. Let's now think about some specific societal challenges related to not getting justice. We can think or police brutality and extrajudicial killings, judicial corruption, and how bribery and preferential treatment has really eroded public confidence. Another one is related to the access to legal representation, where many Nigerians, particularly people who are not from high-income backgrounds, lack access to legal representation and are unaware of their legal rights. This makes too many people more vulnerable to exploitation and injustice. Another one is how many people continue to face challenges with human rights violations, particularly in conflict zones. The next concept to talk about is equity, which is about fairness. With equity, we recognize that people have different starting points, and that we need to provide the resources necessary to achieve equal outcomes. It ensures that marginalized or disadvantaged groups receive support to overcome barriers and participate fully in society. In Nigeria, this includes addressing disparities in education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. With educational inequality, there are regional and gender differences. There are significant differences in access to education between northern and southern Nigeria. In the north, many girls lack access to schooling due to cultural norms, poverty, and insecurity. With gender inequality in education, we see that girls face higher dropout rates due to early marriage, domestic responsibilities, and lack of sanitary facilities in schools. In terms of healthcare access is highly unequal. In the rural areas, many people lack basic medical facilities and healthcare professionals. Maternal mortality rates are higher in rural areas due to the absence of skilled birth attendants. Even in the urban area, the high costs of healthcare services prevent people who are not from high-income households from accessing necessary treatments. Okay, this one is not on the slides. But mental health services is another one to consider in terms of how it remains underdeveloped in many parts of the country. This leaves us with still a relatively widespread stigma and a lack of infrastructure, leaving many people untreated for mental health conditions. Finally, we have economic disparities. Despite Nigeria's natural resources, a large proportion of the population lives in poverty, while the wealth is concentrated in the hands of a small elite. Unemployment and underemployment, especially among youth, remains a critical issue, but only one of the many issues that widen this gap. The next one is inclusion. Inclusion ensures that all individuals, regardless of gender, disability, ethnicity, or economic background, have equal access to opportunities and are fully integrated into society. I know it sounds similar to equity, but inclusion is more about creating a sense of belonging and full integration. The goal is to ensure that every group is valued and represented in all aspects of life. We see the need for this when talking about accessibility barriers for people with mobility disabilities. Nigeria's public infrastructure often lacks the accommodations for people with disabilities, which ends up limiting their mobility and their access to essential services like education, employment, and healthcare. Another one is ethnic and religious exclusion, which have resulted in displacement, loss of lives, and destruction of property, for instance with the herder and farmer communities. Another one that people choose to ignore or deny is the underrepresentation of women in leadership. Women in Nigeria are significantly underrepresented in political and corporate leadership roles, which limits the influence of women in policies. The next is sustainability. Sustainability involves meeting present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. It includes environmental protection, responsible resource management, and promoting economic and social systems that ensure long-term growth and well-being. When we are thinking about how this affects our societies, we can think of the oil spills in the Niger Delta, the deforestation in Nigeria that threatens biodiversity and contributes to soil erosion, the desertification in northern Nigeria that exacerbates food insecurity and displaces communities that rely on farming for their livelihoods. There's also the issue of flooding in coastal regions, from the rising sea levels and unpredictable weather patterns caused by climate change. Another more rampant one is the growing waste management crisis, especially with plastic pollution clogging waterways and increasing the risk of flooding. These are all challenges related to sustainability. I know we said we will keep it brief, so let's talk about the last one really quickly. This is empowerment. Empowerment involves providing individuals and communities with the tools, resources, and opportunities they need to improve their own lives and affect positive change. This is very related to the other ones we have discussed already. For instance, youth empowerment and women empowerment can help us fight the issues related to inequity and inequality. But also, we can think of community development. Many communities, particularly in rural Nigeria, lack basic infrastructure, such as clean water, electricity, and transportation. This lack of infrastructure affects economic development and access to essential services, which makes it difficult for communities to progress and thrive. This is another important challenge to tackle. So hopefully that gives us a brief overview of societal issues. I know it's brief, but the goal here is simply to set the stage. There are too many challenges out there, and with your art, you have the autonomy to make the choice of what to focus on. Even for the Art of Peace challenge, you have the freedom to decide what you want to create for.